So we're going to start our literacy lesson off today looking at a spelling starter, and we're going to look at some more common exception words. We're going to be looking at the words bath, path, and plant. If you lived somewhere else in the country, you might say those words differently. You might say bath, path, and plant. However, where I live in London, lots of people say it with an R sound, which makes it a common exception word. So I'd like to have a look at those words and see if you can learn how to spell them. Then I'm going to cover them up and I'm going to give you some sentences to see if you can write with those words spelt correctly. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And there we go, I've covered them up. So I'd like to have a go at seeing if you can write these sentences. Grab a piece of paper and a pencil, and if you need a little bit of extra time to write it, then do feel free to pause the video to make sure you've got enough time. For the first sentence, I'd like you to write this. I went to plant seeds in my garden. I went to plant seeds in my garden. For the second sentence, I would like you to write, I walked along the stone path. I walked along the stone path. And for the final sentence, I'd like you to write, I got so dirty that I needed a bath. I got so dirty that I needed a bath. If you need a little bit of extra time, that's absolutely fine. Let's see now if we can have a go at spelling those words in those sentences. So, in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the bottom bit here. There we go. And we'll have a go at writing those sentences using the words correctly spelt. Are we ready? So your first sentence should have said, I went to plant, hopefully you spelled that correctly, seeds in my garden. For the second sentence, it was I walked, and actually walked is a common exception word as well. I walked along the stone path, hopefully spelled path correctly. And for the final sentence, I got so dirty that I needed a bath. In fact, I'm going to put an exclamation mark there because I think it's quite funny. So remember, the common exception words we were learning today were bath, path, and plant, but walked is also a common exception word. If you spell any of those wrong, I suggest you maybe practice writing each of them 3 times just to practice them a little bit more to get those ideas in your head to make sure you spell them correctly next time. Okay, now moving on to the main part of today's lesson, we are going to be making a prediction about a text. Now, we talked about predictions before. A prediction is pretty much like a guess, but we use what we already know to help us to make a good guess. So it's not just a random guess, it's a prediction about what might happen. So to be successful, we're going to see if we can recall what's happened in a text. We're going to see if we can explain what we think will happen next. We're going to give reasons for our opinion, and we'll see if we can link and extend our ideas. So what's happened so far in the story of Adelita? Well, we know we were introduced to Adelita's father and mother, Francisco and Adela, and then when Adela gave birth to Adelita, sadly she died and she passed away, which meant that Adelita had to be raised by Esperanza, who was the helper, and her father Francisco. So Francisco then remarried. He found a new wife called Donna Michaela, and she had 2 daughters called Valentina and Dolce. And Esperanza was there to help still, but then sadly, when Francisco died, Donna Michaela decided that she didn't want Esperanza to be around anymore, and she chucked her out. She fired her from her job. Esperanza wanted to stay, and Adelita wanted to as well. However, she wasn't allowed to, and she had to leave. But on top of that, Adelita then got told that she wasn't allowed to be in her bedroom anymore. She got sent to the attic room and had to do all of the jobs that Esperanza had to do. I wonder if this story reminds you a little bit of a different story that you might have read or heard or even seen when you were little. We might talk a little bit more about that in tomorrow's lesson. Now, we are going to be predicting what we think might happen next in the story. So for your task, we're going to write a prediction of what we think will happen next, and we're going to see if we can use some interesting conjunctions and time connectives. So I have got 3 questions for you to consider when you're writing the answer to your prediction. What might happen to Adelita? What might happen to Esperanza? And what might happen to Donna Michaela and her daughters? So there are three things to consider. So I'd like to write 3 sentences for your prediction about what's going to happen. Now, when you've finished writing your prediction, I'm going to put a second video up and I'd like you to watch the rest of the story. And you're going to find out whether your prediction is correct. It doesn't matter if your prediction is right or wrong. It's just a prediction, it's just a guess. But it'd be interesting to find out whether your prediction was correct. And actually, what will be more interesting is once you've heard the rest of the story, whether you then think that it's similar to a story you might have read before.